I am the first memory. Hunger is a strange beast. It begins in the belly, but it ends in the soul. Edgehaven feared the forest because of the shadows that hunt. They should have feared the lights that hide. Deep in the ghostlight walk, the Elderbranch stops using teeth and starts using dreams. It will offer you the fire you crave, the home you lost, and the face of the one person you would die to see again. Kaelin is exhausted, and an exhausted heart is a fertile soil for lies. If you haven't seen her exile, you are not ready for her ghosts. Return to the beginning now. For the rest of you, keep your eyes on the moss. For the lights are singing, and they know your name. This is Chapter 8, The Sanctuary of Lies.
The still mirror had left Kaelin with a sharp, hard-won clarity, but her physical strength had failed. Beyond the tree line, she discovered a clean stream. She drank until the cold numbed her throat, and then allowed her body to give way. She collapsed into a bed of damp moss, surrendering to a fitful, dreamless sleep. The sun was low in the sky when she forced her weary limbs to move again. Leaving the black shore behind, she found the path forward had changed. It was no longer a track of earth. A raised boardwalk of weathered planks wound through a forest of misty reeds. Kaelin stepped onto the wood. Unaware she was walking the ghostlight walk. The air here felt heavy, a gathering of mist and silence. Exhaustion became a physical weight. Every step on the damp planks sent a dull ache through Kaelin's bones, and her muscles felt heavy and slow. The clarity she had found at the lake remained, but it was housed in a failing frame. The spiritual cold of the still mirror had faded, replaced by an older, more primal dread. The fear of the dark and the things that hunted within it. Kaelin needed shelter. She needed a place to wait out the blind hours of the night, but the grove offered no refuge. The gnarled trunks of oak and ironwood rose like pillars in a forgotten temple. Their canopy was a thick vault that swallowed the remaining light. As the air turned cool, the rhythmic chirping of 1,000 crickets filled the woods. The sound only served to heighten the immense, pressing silence of the trees. She felt small, a fragile thing in a world of giants. The courage she had found at the shore was beginning to unravel. Then the lights arrived. At first, they were only faint sparks at the edge of her sight. Glints so brief, she mistook them for a tremor in her vision. She had seen them on her first night in the wood, but had convinced herself they were just ghosts born of the dark. Now, as the shadows thickened, they returned with a quiet confidence. A single orb of soft blue light pulsed by the roots of a great oak. Another, a brilliant white, bloomed in the air beside it. Soon, they were everywhere. Hundreds of shimmering lights danced in the gloom, hovering above the misty water on either side of the boardwalk. They wove between the ancient trunks in silent, swaying patterns. They moved like a slow swarm of fireflies. Their glow cast a luminescence that transformed the menacing grove into a landscape of silver and sapphire. It was as if a handful of stars had been caught in the branches and were now trying to dance their way free. For a long moment, Kaelin forgot her exhaustion. She forgot the dread. Her senses were full of a breathless awe. It is a gift, a dangerous thought whispered in the cold hollow of her mind. The forest had guided her with the moss. Surely this was another sign, a reward for surviving the lake. The thought was seductive. It was so welcome that she gripped it with everything she had left. Rowan was immune to the spectacle. He moved with a rigid tension, his belly nearly brushing the damp planks of the boardwalk. A vibration thrummed in his chest, a low, constant note of distrust. He did not look at the beauty of the lights. Instead, he tracked each one as a hunter tracks an arrow, his eyes darting with a frantic, lethal precision. Kaelin was a needle caught between two magnets. Her exhausted frame pleaded for the rest the lights promised, but Rowan's suspicion acted as an anchor. It was a pressure in her chest she could not ignore. The lesson of the still mirror remained. Beauty in this wood was often a veil for a jagged truth. The shimmering lights began to gather ahead. They swirled together until their combined glow carved a path through the reeds, leading away from the rotting boardwalk. They bobbed in a rhythmic dance. It was a silent invitation to find safety. Kaelin hesitated. She watched the glowing trail while the warning of her only friend vibrated in the air. One pull offered an end to the biting cold. The other warned of a predator's trap. Caught between a desperate hope and a cold certainty, she took a single wary step forward. The path revealed by the dancing lights was deceptively smooth. It was a trail of moss that seemed to wait for her footsteps, leading her away from the boardwalk and into a small clearing of firm ground. In the center, the lights swirled together. Their individual sparks merged until they formed a single, heartening sight, a campfire. The creation was flawless. The light was no longer the spectral blue of the moats. It had become a rich, inviting orange that crackled around a stack of dry logs. A protective ring of heat pushed back the freezing shadows of the wood. Kaelin heard the rhythmic snap of burning timber and felt a more potent lure. The rich, savory scent of roasting meat. Kaelin's stomach tightened with a sharp, hollow ache. She had not eaten since Alara's honey cakes that morning. The weight of her journey suddenly felt unbearable. The scent was intoxicating, offering everything her frame craved. Heat for her skin and relief for her hunger. The wall of her caution, eroded by hours of struggle, finally collapsed. This must be real, she thought. This is my reward. Kaelin moved toward the clearing. Every instinct pulled her toward the light, like a physical tether. Rowan, however, planted his feet. The vibration in his chest grew louder, a resonant, demanding warning. When she tried to step around him, he pressed his weight against her leg and gripped the hem of her trousers in his teeth. He was a physical anchor against the tide of her desperation. "Rowan, stop," she whispered. Her voice was thin. "It is a fire. We need it." The dog ignored her. He pulled again, his growl unwavering. The refusal acted as a bucket of ice over her feverish desire. She looked from his bristling form to the perfect campfire, and a memory from the black shore returned. The still, obsidian surface of the lake, just before the ghosts had appeared. It had looked perfect, too. Kaelin realized the trap. The forest gave tests, but it never gave gifts. A chill hit her that had nothing to do with the night air. This was not a mercy, it was a noose. With a choked sound of disappointment, Kaelin forced herself to turn away from the promise of warmth. Her stomach knotted in protest. Every muscle pleaded for her to return to the heat, but she trusted Rowan. She trusted the lesson the still mirror had carved into her mind. Kaelin and Rowan pressed on, leaving the phantom heat of the campfire behind. The true path was now a ghost of its former self. She was forced back onto the rickety boardwalk, where the timber groaned under her weight. The only reliable light came from the north side of the ancient trees, a humble emerald moss that provided a faint, steady glow. The shimmering lights, however, were not finished with their games. The lights swirled ahead, weaving a new and more heartbreaking lure. Nestled between the massive roots of two towering oaks stood the image of a small, sturdy cottage. It was built from dark timber and weathered fieldstone, exactly like the homes in Edgehaven. A plume of cedar-scented smoke curled lazily from the chimney, rising toward the dark canopy. Warm, honeyed light flooded from the windows, promising a soft mattress and a solid roof. The illusion was so detailed that Kaelin could almost feel the dry heat of a hearth on her skin. She heard the distant, muffled melody of a fiddle, a tune that spoke of festivals and safety. It was an image of everything she had ever lost. It was a vision of a home where she belonged. This temptation was a jagged ache that pierced deeper than her hunger. It was a snare for her heart rather than her stomach. Kaelin stopped, her fingers clutching the wooden necklace until the spiral bit into her palm. A storm of longing rose within her, making it hard to breathe. Rowan's low growl remained a constant, steady reminder of the truth. This was a lie. It was a cruel and beautiful deception. Kaelin closed her eyes, shutting out the amber light of the windows and the scent of the wood smoke. Her resolve had been tested at the shore, and now it began to solidify. She understood the nature of the trial. The Elderbranch was dissecting her, preying on every basic human need: food, warmth, and shelter. To pass, she had to abandon her desires. She had to refuse the comfort she craved. When she opened her eyes again, Kaelin refused to look at the inviting glow of the cottage. Her gaze dropped to the rotting planks of the boardwalk. She searched for the pale, honest light of the moss. That had been her first guide. It was the only light she would trust. She would ignore the lies, no matter how bright. She would follow the truth, no matter how dim. Kaelin kept her eyes fixed on the mossy planks of the boardwalk. Her world had shrunk to a narrow circle of awareness. The shimmering lights flickered at the edges of her vision, but she refused to give them her attention. Her focus remained on the true path, a faint trail marked by the humble emerald glow of the moss. It offered no comfort and no promises. It offered only the truth of the way forward. Rowan trotted beside her. The low vibration in his chest had settled now that she had listened to his warning. A grim certainty began to harden in Kaelin's heart. The forest was testing her, stripping away every mortal desire to see what remained. She had refused the lure of food and the promise of a solid roof. She thought she had understood the nature of the trial. The Elderbranch, however, held a more predatory deception in reserve. The shimmering lights gathered on the path ahead. They swirled together until their blue and white sparks merged into a single golden luminescence. It was not the orange heat of the fire or the yellow glow of the cottage. This was a gentler light. It was familiar and dear. It took shape. Standing in a pool of warm light was the perfect image of Alara. Kaelin halted. Her forward momentum died as her heart gave a sudden, painful lurch. It was her. Every detail was exquisitely correct. The stooped shoulders, the familiar patched shawl, and the face wrinkled like a dried apple. It was the eyes that broke Kaelin's resolve. They were Alara's bright, observant magpie eyes, filled with an expression of profound relief. The phantom smiled. The gesture was a physical blow. Then the illusion spoke. The voice was a perfect echo of the raspy warmth that had been the only consistent comfort in Kaelin's life. "Kaelin, child, thank the spirits I found you." The phantom Alara stepped forward, reaching out a hand in a beckoning gesture. "I was so worried. I followed as far as my old bones would carry me. This way, child. I have found a hollow sheltered from the wind where we can rest." This was not a lure for her body. It was an arrow aimed at the softest part of her soul. Her loneliness and her grief rose up in an overwhelming wave. She didn't think of logic or sigils. She only felt a desperate, childlike need. She wanted this to be real. She wanted the isolation to end. The urge to run into that embrace was a tearing ache in her chest. Tears blurred the image of the old woman. Kaelin stood paralyzed. Her feet felt rooted to the wood, while her heart felt as though it were being pulled apart. It would be so easy to believe. It would be so easy to surrender to this one beautiful hope. Rowan's growl returned. It was low and sharp, a blade of sound cutting through her emotional storm. He pressed his weight against her leg, acting as a solid grounding anchor. His warning was the only truth she had left. Kaelin closed her eyes, letting the hot tears spill down her cheeks. She couldn't look at that kind, lying face any longer. Her fingers clutched the necklace at her throat. Its steady heat was a stark contrast to the frantic beating of her own heart. She forced herself to think. She tried to remember Alara's real voice. The real Alara was leagues behind her, her strength spent by the village gate. The real Alara possessed a magic of roots and wisdom, not the power to craft golden illusions in the deep woods. This was a ghost, a memory used as a weapon. It was the hardest truth she had ever faced. With a sob torn from the core of her being, Kaelin turned her back on the phantom of her dearest friend. She forced her stiffened limbs to move, stepping away from the golden light and back onto the moss-lit path. Each step was a physical agony. Kaelin, the illusion called. The voice was no longer warm. It was laced with a pained, heartbreaking confusion. "Child, where are you going? Do not leave me alone out here." The words were a final, vicious twist of the knife. Kaelin squeezed her eyes shut and walked on, refusing to look back. Behind her, the golden light flickered and wavered. With a soft, sighing sound, the image dissolved into a swarm of cold sparks that scattered into the darkness. She continued her journey with a heart that felt bruised and broken. The tears still streamed down her face, but she did not stop. She walked with a new certainty, one forged in the fires of her own heartbreak. She had learned the harshest lesson of the Elderbranch. The most beautiful promises were often the most dangerous traps.
The cruelest thing a forest can do is give you exactly what you want. Kaelin has walked through the fire of her own longing and come out cold. She has learned that the truth is rarely beautiful, and beauty is rarely true. By turning her back on the face of the one she loved, she has finally closed the door on the girl she used to be. The Elderbranch has stripped her of her hunger, her hope, and her home. I have left the way to find your guardian and the collector pack at the foundation of this record. Claim them before the illusions find you. In our next meeting, the silence is broken. I remain the first memory. Watch the shadows, for they are watching you.